And then we boarded that boat to get to Pachlevi. There was a storm on the sea, and I could see while in Ostaszków, my father made a suitcase out of plywood.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember on the corner there was his name sculptured.
Mm-hmm.
It's in that wood.
Carved in the wood,
It was painted black.
And what was your father's first name?
Stanisław.
So it was Stanisław Myszak.
Tak.
Mm-hmm. Carved on this
In the
piece
corner.
of yes.
And this is where we had all our documents. This is where, because they started to throw all the luggage into the water.
Because
the
of the
boat
storm?
was overcrowded. So to, let some...
Load?
Yes, so they really started throwing, and I saw my suitcase flying down to the boat. This is why I have no birth certificate. So that's it.
No, that's not it. You arrived in Pachlevi, and another terrible event comes just a couple of days later.
No, the next day. We arrived at dawn, late, early in the morning. It was still dark. And they started pushing us all, getting out of the tents. We were in a tent because we had to go through this section,
yes, registration and everything.
And so my mom says, but she didn't move much on the boat because she was depressed. She was, even if she didn't feel that my father died, I think she probably knew. Subconsciously she knew. So she says, I cannot go anywhere. So I ran to the Red Cross tent, and I said, I have my mother who says that she cannot make the trip to the other camp. So she says, bring her here. And you see, this is where till today, I blame myself that I did not have enough brain to ask them to come to the tent. Instead, I left my two sisters, and it wasn't far. It was like the other side of the street. I walked my mother there, and my mother fell. My mother fell. The nurse came quickly and gave her an injection, but it did not help. She died. So we had, Danka and Stasia only came to say goodbye, and we were whisked fast because we had to go to the other camp. That's what happened. So that was the next day. We hardly arrived, but that was within, because my father died. You know that my husband died on the same day like my father. It's incredible, because my father died on the 23rd of March, and Staś died on the 23rd of March. Incredible.
Shall we stop?
So this is when these ladies that we were traveling with, the group of ladies, they were the ladies, wives of the people of the military who were in the ośrodek zapasowy. They suddenly realized that they have 3 young girls on their hands in the group, so they quickly ran to the Polish yes, Red Cross, and these ladies started coming.
Because your little brother, he was not with you at that time.
Brother?
Yes,
He remained in the hospital.
He remained on the other side of the sea in the hospital. Okay.
So he started going, you know, that they insisted that I join the orphanage.
The orphanage.
Because they were Polish army and the civilians, and among them also an orphanage.
Right.
And I said no.
And you were 12 at that time?
Not yet.
Not yet. Your sister
12,
Danka,
you're right.
your sister Danka, she was 8, and
Stasia was 6.
Stasia was 6.
And you wouldn't believe why I did not want to go to the orphanage.
Tell me.
Before the war, in 1938, Richard and myself, I did mention that to you, there was a Polish organization, religious one, like Sodalicja Mariańska,
The Marian Society.
ale ta wcześniejsza, która się nazywała Krucjata Eucharystyczna.
Okay, so it was like a Eucharistic crusade, a religious organization.
Yes, and we went for there was a big meeting from Wolynia, from the whole area, and we were stationed in the buildings of an orphanage in Równe.
Okay, and that was before World War II began,
Just
of
before
course.
the war. And that made, actually no, orphanage, being an orphan was a very painful thing. And at that meeting, big meeting, I, for some reason, suffered a big sadness. For some reason, there wasn't anything, the buildings were nice, but you know, as if it was a premonition. I don't know, I did, for me it was a very, very sad experience, even though it wasn't supposed to be. And this is why, when they came to tell me,
with that idea of orphanage, you and your sisters going to the orphanage.
Suddenly something clinked.
Uh-huh.
And I said, no, I'm not going. And you know, they came another time. They left in peace for some time, they came another time.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, Stasia was not well, so she was in a hospital, infirmary,
Yes.
under the tent. And our belongings were on a hill.
Mm-hmm.
And that infirmary was down the hill. Danka stayed with our belongings on that hill, and I'm coming out from the tent where I visited Stasia, I could see there Danusia surrounded by a group of ladies. They wanted to profit the moment that I wasn't there. They were going to talk Danka into going to the orphanage. But I came quickly
You ran back,
out.
and
No.
as a most senior person in the family, you objected.
Yeah.
Then, in 1949, you went or you came to Canada. My first question, why didn't you go back to Poland? And then the subsequent question, why did you choose Canada?
Our stay in Lebanon was exactly like the stay in Iran. It was in transition. We knew we couldn't stay there permanently because none of the countries were the countries receiving immigrants. They had their own problems, so they didn't need more problems. They just couldn't do it. We could not stay there permanently. So, when the time came and I left Iran, we left Isfahan in 1945. So that was then the end of war. Did people, of course, all the time, since we arrived in Iran until we left Beirut, Lebanon, our goal, our high hopes were that we were on the way to Poland. We were going back to Poland. I myself could not see any other solution. I was going to Poland. And whatever we did, not only individually, but also Polish
collectively.
Government, Polish institution, which were geared towards not only our return to Poland, but our return to Poland well equipped for work in Poland, for helping Poland to raise.
Rebuild itself after?
Rebuild, yes, from ashes.
Mm-hmm.
This is what was our goal. We were, the whole personnel, whatever level, were concentrated on preparing us for that, for these jobs. Even when my colleagues and myself later were going to pursue our studies, and and direction of our studies depended on what would be useful for after-war Poland.
So you were one of those tens of or hundreds young Polish people,
yeah.
boys and girls, young women, young men, who are far from their homeland, but they receive education, they function in the Polish language environment with the primary goal. We are going back to Poland. Poland is our homeland. Our goal is to serve Poland to become stronger.
Yes, recover.
Mm-hmm. And this is why you chose Teachers College, right? To become a professor or teacher of Polish language.
Actually, it was actually not the teachers, of course, if it would be, absolutely, but also recovering the language,
Mm-hmm.
preserving the language, preserving the Polish culture, which at that time was already greatly shattered by two of our enemies.
Mm-hmm.
You see? Later on, because giving an example, first at the opening of this Polish institute Polish studies, we were about 20-some people, because the enthusiasm was great. We were full of Poland. Our hearts were Polish. We couldn't see anything else beyond that, beyond return to Poland. However, the results of the war were not satisfactory. We suffered a great shock. I couldn't imagine myself living somewhere else, not in a homeland, not in a homeland of my parents. Like the whole deportation, the life of suffering in Russia were totally in vain. Like we could have stayed behind if we were not to return to Poland, which we genuinely loved.
But you suddenly learn that your
But then,
Poland is no longer
hit
Poland.
over the head, suddenly we stopped. Many of the young people thought, yeah, but if I study only Polish and Polish things, and I, with the thought of going back to Poland, and yet I am not going to Poland, maybe I should change the line of my studies and get into something more practical. So in the end, many of my students, colleagues who originally joined the Polish studies of the Polish Institute in Beirut, changed into something else. There were some who studied nursing, others pharmacy, others, more practical professions. But then gradually the Polish community all over the world had to be terminated. Absolutely terminated in the sense that people had to be evacuated from the countries where they were. There was no permanency in any way. We could not stay. To the extent that in Lebanon, in the end, there were about 500 people. I talked to a friend of mine who is still in London and who found herself among those 500 people, that in the end, as a mercy gesture, British authorities decided to receive them. Those who had absolutely no right to have no entrance
to go somewhere
conditions by the British. No way, but it happened. The emigration of the Polish community in Lebanon started with the families of Polish military people, because the military people went already to Great Britain as when the moving out started. Then their families went in 1947, at the end of 1947. And the Polish community in Beirut tried. There was Polish legation, Zawodowski was there, everybody was trying to force British authorities to accept us to Britain. Because what has happened is that I refused to go to New Zealand. There was a group of children and the suitable personnel who went to New Zealand. I was on the list. It was 1944. And I,
of course, with your younger
two
two
sisters.
And a brother.
In the my brother, whom I met in most unusual circumstances, stayed for a little time, not for a long time, went to
Junior cadet school. Okay, right.
to the cadet school in Palestine. Because those were the times when any young and fit man would never stay with a group of girls in schools. We had only about 12 boys for the big schools of about 300 girls, you see, and they were not able to serve.
They were not fit.
Are not fit at all. So they all ran to, there were a number of schools, cadet school, mechanical school, air school, yes.
Right. So all the boys were in military schools or schools
absolutely,
that prepared
in
them
military,
for future military careers.
Yes.
Right.
So Richard went in 1947 when the cadet schools, so Junackie szkoły, went to England. So I thought that would give me the right to go to Britain to join my brother. But of course it wasn't so. It wasn't so because Richard was 17 at that time. He really had to go to school because if he didn't, then why would he go to Britain? That was the only reason why, for him to stay in Britain. So this way, it turned out there was a moment where all the military families went to Britain, all the other people who already planned their exit from Lebanon already went, New Zealand, Australia. There was a group of people who went to Mexico. And because I refused to go to any of these countries, and I wasn't accepted in Britain, then a very strange situation happened there in Lebanon, that I was the only family who had no older person. I was not of age. At that time you had to be 21. With two children. I believe you saw my passport.
Yes.
Where it says Halina Myszak and my sisters
and two
are
sisters.
like my children.
Yeah.
But we had to leave Lebanon. And there was a Canadian commission who came to Lebanon, and they offered them, whoever was interested, to come and talk to the military Canadian Immigration Commission of Canada. I wasn't interested, of course not. I was going to Poland. But then I talked to Michał Tyszkiewicz, he looked after the students in Beirut.
He was a member of the Polish mission there.
He was there, yes. He was in legation, Polish
yes,
legation.
a Polish diplomat.
Od Ordonki. And he really, we didn't know what to do, because first of all, it's that I was not of age. So in fact, even Canadian, I don't know how it happened anyway, that they accepted me.
Mm-hmm.
There was a young man, a consular advisor, or actually everything depended on him, if you were accepted or not accepted.
Do you remember his name?
I beg pardon?
Do you remember his name?
Of course I do remember his name.
So, what was his name?
No, that was a very funny situation, very funny. Because in this Canadian commission there was a Pan Maliński, Polak, Polish guy, but who was Canadian. I think he was actually, I heard later from my father-in-law, he was like a ugryzie, like no, w drugim oddziale jakieś tam.
Okay.
Cerber.
Okay.
Bo on sprawdzał, czy my, you know, whether we are suitable,
so he was responsible for security,
politically, absolutely, whether we are suitable.
Yes.
No, then I said, fine, if you accept me, I saw John Knowles, that's his name, and then what do I do with my sisters? Well, they can stay until you have money to make them come to Canada.
To sponsor them to come to Canada.
I was saying, how can I do that? How could I do that? So, such a far away land, will I make enough money to offer them, you know, a trip to Canada? Well, you know, it can be done. So, you know, if it's not your skin, you're very optimistic. Then finally, he accepted Danka. And Danka was 16 at the time. For work, because the only work that they would offer you, men, to work on a farm for 2 years. You had to sign the contract. Women for domestic work for 1 year. Then, but I still have a younger sister.
Yes, Stasia, who is 14.
Stasia, who is, no, you can leave her too.
In Lebanon?
Yeah. So then I decided that I'm going to have a talk with Mr. John Knowles. And I went, because they worked in the Polish center, you know,
in the premises,
near the legation, there was another building, you see. So when I thought it was the end of the work, 4 or 5 o'clock, I went there and I said that we are going for coffee.
With that John Knowles.
He is well known, so
okay.
I don't think he's alive anymore. Probably he died. Because I met spotkałam jego córkę.
So you met his daughter?
W szpitalu, tak.
In Montreal.
Bardzo zabawnie. Bo i wtedy mu powiedziałam, że w ogóle nie ma żadnej możliwości, żebym ja zostawiła jakąkolwiek moją siostrę tu.
So you told him
proszę,
you're not going anywhere
tak.
alone. That you either go with your sisters
or no. To wtedy on się zgodził.
So then he accepted. He said, okay.
All of a sudden it was possible.
But it was your determination, your
absolutely,
openness.
Absolutely. Nie było żadnych bargains, żadnych.
Aha.
Tyle tylko,
But
że jak przyjechaliśmy do portu już, żeby się władować na statek, bo John miał jechać do Düsseldorfu. On pracował.
So you went to the port to board
To board the
ship.
And Mr. Knowles is there.
Oh.
A ja mówię, a dlaczego? Co się stało? Because I thought I will come with you on the ship and then I'll take a plane in Naples.
Okay.
Ja polecę do Düsseldorfu z tego. God. Ale na tym statku, i widzisz, jaka taka byłam głupia, zupełnie mi to nic nie mówiło. Not at all. He offers me a ring.
Oh my goodness.
But I absolutely, nothing came through my mind. In the meantime, you know, Jonathan, there were some young people my age, and I've met a very nice girl with whom we were then very close friends, and her sister-in-law became my close friend too. So, from Africa, this is because they came from, the boat that came to pick us up in Beirut went first to Africa to pick up people from Africa. This is why I was. And another thing is, we board the boat, and there's somebody screaming, Halusha, Halusha, Halusha. And I didn't know anything about it. And it turns out that it is my aunt that I haven't met, because she was in Russia too, but she was very ill, could hardly walk, and she was sent to Rhodesia. Decided to go to Canada too. And this is where we met. So that was most unusual thing too, and they were going to Canada. But then came John, and that ring, I was not geared. You see, I was not going into that direction. I was not going to get married. I was not interested. Plus, I was leaving behind a very beloved soul. So there was no even thought about it. And that's it. So then in Naples, he went to Düsseldorf, that was that. And we came to Halifax. That's, I believe your babcia went to Halifax too, and then by the train.
So you went through Pier 21.
I have no idea.
You don't. I mean, yeah.
Those are the times where I was not interested, where they take me.
But your sisters?
With me, absolutely. No, we were going. There was no way I was going to leave them.
So you were registered in Halifax, and then?
Then on the train, and it's very, I don't know what's the key, how they divided the people, because part of my friends from Beirut and majority of people from Africa came to Montreal. Yeah. But our group from Lebanon was divided, and some of them came out in Ajax. There were, as I noticed, families with men. You see, the complete families. Were they those who signed the contracts to work on in the fields, in farms? I presume so. I presume. Anyway, and here...
So it's 1949 and you arrive in Canada?
No, I arrived in Canada, then we were stationed at St. Paul Hermite, There was a group of women who did the selection, actually, as far as the employers were concerned. My professor used to tell me, try to go to Ottawa, because there was already Dr. Szyszczyński was there.
Some Polish people were already there.
Some professors that were already teaching in Beirut were in Ottawa. But this lady, I later helped her because I knew the languages, so I could serve as an interpreter for other people, you see. So this is what happened. This is where I met my husband too. Because he came with his father. My father-in-law always greeted the Poles. He considered, even though officially he was no longer employed, he himself remained, because he worked for the government in London. He himself, out of his own free will, without pay, and he performed certain duties which he felt belonged to him.
Right. So your future father-in-law, he was a Polish diplomat with a distinguished career in the Polish Foreign Service.
For the very beginning.
And he was a representative of the Polish government in exile. In Canada. He was no longer
officially,
but he stayed in Canada, and he continued, as you said, performing some of his duties because he felt obliged to do so.
Not so. I think we will interpret it differently. Is that these people who came to Canada did not return to Poland, because that was also a sort of a demonstration that to this Poland, which is not under democratic rule, we do not go back. So these were Poles. Actually, we even call this immigration independent. These were the independent Poles that were avoiding to be governed by the communist forces.
So his son, your future husband, he spent the entire war in the German military prison, because in 1939, or after 1939, he was imprisoned and sent to a camp, Sachsenhausen, right?
Which was a concentration camp.
Yes, it was a concentration camp. And then, when the war ended,
he came to Canada, because his family was here.
He joined his family in Canada, and you met them.
And I met him then.
And you were 20?
Yes.
20 years old, 21, but you had your work contract, didn't you, with the Canadian
government? This is why we were in St. Paul Ermite, because this is where the connection between the future employee and the employer took place. This is where they came to pick us up.
Right, the matching ceremony.
Absolutely. But it was very difficult, because Danka was 16. I really don't know how they managed.
And Stasia was 14.
And Stasia, but this is where I was a person who had a child. So the employer had to take me and my sister. We shared the same room. They couldn't, sometimes you had an employer who was wealthy, where you had good living conditions, but these people were rather, he was in the army, and he was the manager of IMCA, YMCA.
So you were working as a household assistant or some sort of maid, right?
Yeah.
For someone who lived here in Montreal.
Who lived in Montreal.
Who had a family.
Who had very modest conditions of, and they had 2 children, 5 and 3, who were not in the best of health. Had some problems. The children had problems, and then I had the problem too. But with them, and in the end, when I met my husband and we started meeting at the University of Montreal, gradually we became friends, close friends, and I did tell my husband, that I'm having problems with the mom there. So he moved me out of there. And I changed my place of work.
Right. But as a person working for this Canadian family, you could also pursue your studies here, right?
In the evening only. Only in the evening. Then it became more difficult because of the complications.
Yes. And what did you study? What did you choose to study?
I continued what I had in Beirut.
Okay.
At the
Slavic languages.
Yes, yes. But I was planning to do my master's, but then I came in 1949 in August. I worked
for this family.
But after New Year's I stopped working, and then. I went, I had another work, you could exchange, you could do the change. Or later on, I found out that actually my husband then found out we were not married, but he discovered that if you wanted to break the contract, you could pay Canadian government a certain amount of money, which would be the equivalent of your transport from Lebanon to. So in the end, that's what happened.
Right. And
then we got married in April of 1950. So then I was still having, I have my papers. But then Grażyna was born next year in May, and we had some work with my husband together because he had a problem too. He had Matura in 38.
Yeah, high school certificate.
Certificate entitled him to go to the university. He was ready to go for medicine, but then the war broke out, and already he was in the underground army, and already in 1940, Germans arrested him and put him in.
And sent him to the concentration.
So actually the whole 5 years of war, he stayed
behind the bars.
And it was not what really from he had some friends there, or made some friends there, who were already older than he was. He was already Zbyszek Międzybrodzki, he was already an engineer na Stoczni, prawda, w Gdańsku. Several of them were actually they lived here in Montreal.
Okay, so for your husband, war also meant a substantial delay in his education and preparation for life. Yes,
absolutely, he had no chance. This is a typical classical example of how war can really ruin your
people's
plans,
lives.
ruin your life, ruin, where do we start then?
So what did he do here in Canada?
Well, he used to write to the papers. He was a journalist. He was, but then at the same time, he started with the technical. Thank God he had a mathematical inclinations. So he has managed to get one job where he worked, on big projects. He started very early and very slowly. So in the end, he made some courses, he made some very significant jobs for some big companies. And in the end, he was able to join the Professional Engineering Corporation. So that's how he's really very big job where he worked and was very proud of it, because many companies did some I can say not nice financial complications, and his job was there absolutely beautiful. That was Claude, what was his name? Claude, that he, Olympic swimming pool, that was his project of the Saint Claude Probillard.
Oh.
That's where he worked.
Right. Let me ask you the following question. So you are a young woman getting married relatively early because you were 21 years old.
No, I wasn't 21. That's why pułkownik Libich był moim kuratorem.
20, of course. So you needed a special permission to get
Absolutely.
married from your
curator. This is what I usually say. I didn't need a special permission to sign my domestic work contract, but I did need it later to get married.
Yeah. So you get married, and then you become a mother. Your first daughter is born, and then 2 years later your second daughter is born, and then your third daughter is born,
and then my fourth son is born.
And then your fourth son is born. Lucky you. So you have 4 children before you are 30, and that would involve a lot of work, I believe. But you also were involved in some other activities, like pursuing your education.
At that time, I wasn't very active in community work, Polish community. It means my children were, because you see, Kazimier's picture, marching,
in the Polish parades?
They were, on the 3rd of May, and they lived in a Polish atmosphere.
And you spoke Polish at home, of course, with your husband.
There was no other way. There was no other way. We wouldn't accept it. Why would we talk? None of the languages was ours, or were ours.
Even though you were proficient in English and French.
Yes, that was not a problem. But between ourselves, it's like today with my friends, school friends, we don't speak any other language except Polish. And I presume your grandmother also spoke with her friends Polish. There was no other way.
But Poland, with the time passing by, I think might become more and more distant or more and more abstract.
No.
Your hometown, Zdołbunów, was no longer in Poland. It was part of the Ukrainian Socialist
but
Republic.
Psychologically, I never accepted it. That is, your inside depends on that, how you act outside. It depends on, I don't know, because there is a question about how I accepted the fact that my children and grandchildren and great-grand how come that they don't speak Polish, or if they didn't speak Polish. There was absolutely with me no question that I would address my children in any other language but
Polish.
Yeah. My great-grandchildren won't speak Polish because the spouses of my grandsons are not Polish.
They are Canadians.
Not even the European. No, I'm just joking. They are, as you know, Kazimier's wife is Italian. Grażyna's husband is Polish. However, and Izabela tylko, her daughter, has a husband who speaks Polish well. But they have slight accents. But Izabela cannot use Polish at home because her first son had some problems with enunciation, with so they had to use one language to just not confuse him any further.
Let me ask probably one more question. For you, was there any particular moment or situation when you realized that Canada is your permanent place of living, that returning back to Poland
Will never
happen? And how did you adapt to that reality?
It was, if I couldn't go to Poland, I mean, this is the thing that I did realize at one point, because it was my feeling about return to Poland was based on the political facts of what was going on there, what was going on anywhere in the world, because we depended on that, what this world was planning to do for Poland or not to do for Poland. Well, you see, because we were successful in retaining our Polishness, our traditions, and as you know, what has helped us was the presence of my parents-in-law, who were, I mean, they could not be anything else but Polish. Presence of General Sosnkowski here too, with whom we were very much attached to him, but also he was present in our home from time to time. We spent vacations on his property, you see. So that was also a retainer. That was something that really helped us out. Of course, there were very many people who have gone through Arundel, but they were not impressed with it because they did not know Polish history.
Right. So I guess you're trying to tell me that you successfully recreated or created anew your own Poland here in Canada. Through language, people, customs.
Yeah.
So
we did it.
Instead of returning to Poland, which for various reasons was
we
impossible,
built our home on a foreign land. If you want to say it so. Yeah.
And that was a Polish home.
I would say our Polish home on foreign land.
Because whenever I enter your place, your apartment, I feel as if I were somewhere in Poland. With all those paintings, artifacts.
That you were
lots of
100
books.
years ago.
No. Not 100 years ago. Not at all.
Yeah, no, but that's true. That's true. We were actually, because even throughout our stay out of Poland, we were still, I mean, your babcia Jonathan went through Russia, went through Africa, but her home here, I'm sure, was Polish.
I mean, that's it.
And your mom too.
Less,
Yeah.
but still, yeah.
That's it. Dear Pani Halina, thank you very much for this part of our conversation. We hope to be able to continue it in a short time. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. I thank you too. It's not an easy job.